Thank you, Doug, and welcome all to Archaeology Discovery Weekend 2020. My name is Dawn Acevedo. I'll be the voice that you hear from time to time, introducing our speakers and reading your questions. And just so you know, for the most part, we're presenting live here from CNEA. So for our first presentation, it's my honor to present to you Drs. Doug Clark, whom you've just met virtually, and Larry Herr, Professor Emeritus at Burman University and co-director of the excavations at Tal al-Umayri, Jordan. These two gentlemen have poured their blood, sweat, and tears into the Madaba Plains Project, and specifically Umayri. So I know that their passion will shine through as they tell us all about the Madaba Plains Project, Tal al-Umayri.
Thank you, Don. And we are assuming Larry Herr is somewhere to be found.
I am indeed, Doug.
He will be co-presenting this with me. He and I worked together on this project since its inception in 1984. So this is more than 30 years in the making, and we actually worked together in archaeology in Jordan before that. But in any case, we will be doing this together. And in a way, what we would like to do is highlight some important finds, sometimes architecture, sometimes artifacts, by looking at the various periods represented at Tel al-Umayri. And in some way, this will be a stroll down memory lane for Larry and me. Larry actually ended his work in the field in 2008, and the season has closed, at least the site has closed in 2016. We're not sure what's going to happen in the future. We'll come back to say something about that too. So is Larry, do I hear your voice?
Yeah, do you hear me, Doug?
I do. Thank
All
you.
right. You want me to talk about the dolmen, or we thought we were digging tombs on the south side of the Tel, and people entered this mysterious looking space that you see in the lower left of the picture, thinking it might be the entrance to a tomb. But instead, we found that it was a particular type of burial known in many places in Jordan as a dolmen. Not only Jordan, but North Africa and even parts of Europe. These were all over in the early Bronze Age. And we were very lucky. Usually, dolmens, which are above ground, produce nothing. But we found all these pots pictured in the slide in the lower right, and 20 burials based on skulls, which you can see in the other long bones in the picture on the upper right. So we were very lucky.
And we've identified the numbers, more like 25 to 28 skeletons. And we now can gender them. We can now give age, and we are working on pathologies. So, but then we move fairly quickly to another part of the Bronze Age. Larry, this is something that you have spent a lot of time studying.
Oh, this is dear to my heart. This is a picture of stratigraphy on the left side, the various levels of an archaeological site, and how do we tell the difference between them. Look in the lower right of the black and white photo. It's partially covered by the color photo, but you can see two walls going into the ground. We have made a cut going across there. On the left is one stratum or one city. On the right is an earlier city. And that house that we see on the right side of that black and white picture is being excavated in the color photo. And we found about 30 smashed vessels, some having still the chickpeas in them that were stored there in that house from the early Bronze III period, about 2500 BC.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Let me scoot to the Middle Bronze Age. We'll take about a minute on each of these slides. We don't know much about the Middle Bronze Age at Umayri. We do have a nicely defined defense system. You can see where the red line is. So people who wanted to attack the city would have to go down into a dry moat and then up a steep rampart and then over the top of that down into the city. So this was an important part which suggested that people had things to protect. That's why you build protection. And so then the late Bronze Age, often think about that as the time of Moses. Larry, is this a temple or is this a palace or is it some combination?
Well, you and I are going to get into a fight here. But I think that this is a shrine that happens to be part of a larger building, perhaps a palatial kind of structure. The shrine is on the right side of the picture where you see the word cultic niche and altar, sanctuary, and so on. Entry hall, you see the fallen standing stones, and even looks almost like an incense altar there with a dark stain on it. But there were three rooms that had a sacred aspect to them. However, in the very bottom part of the picture, you can see a series of stone steps going up. And that led to a series of rooms above the two rooms called side rooms on the left of the picture. Those had nothing to do with sacred activities.
Right.
Uh,
And Kent Bramlett, who did his PhD dissertation, we'll be hearing from him soon, feels that this leans more toward the sacred side to a temple. But he is at the University of Toronto. He did his doctoral dissertation on this and comparable materials elsewhere in Jordan and around. So an artist rendition here, Rhonda Root at Andrews University, gives a nice cutaway image of
and
what this would have been used for.
we
It
should say,
looks like, and Larry, we don't know the meaning or the significance of the rooms behind what we can see here, the rooms on the left in the earlier top plan, but everything on the right seems to be religious and seems to be sacred. So that connection has certainly been important for Kent as he did his study on this.
we should say, Doug, that this is the best preserved late Bronze Age building in all of Jordan.
Preserved to almost what? Almost 10 feet high, at least in some places.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we shift to something that just by happenstance, serendipitously, ended up as my responsibility. And over several years and several dig seasons, exposed this house, which is a 4-room house. You see it in quotation marks. It's a particular house plan that was used widely in Jordan and in Israel and the West Bank, and originating around probably a little bit before 1200 BC, and then running as a house plan through the 6th century, something of that nature. So hundreds of these have been excavated, but ours happens to be the best preserved anywhere. So a lot of people have come to us thinking about this. Larry, Herr is sitting, as you can see in the lower part of the picture, on an animal pen. Otherwise, you have rooms. Larry Garrity is standing in the left side first room, long room. It's a central long room. I'm sitting in the right side long room, and then there's a broad room in the back. It had a second story, so you don't count all the rooms. It's just that you count the footprint. That's where you get the 4-room house. This is something that formed the central part of Monique Vincent's dissertation at the University of Chicago. And she studied this as well as the neighborhood and other sites comparatively to try to find out something about social structures and family structures. So we'll be hearing from her in a bit, but she'll be talking about Balua rather than Umayri.
And everything in that picture was found by us except the blankets and the flesh on the people. We found their bones, but.
Right. Okay, Larry, administrative complex. We've moved some time.
Yeah, we're considerably later. We're in about the 7th to 6th centuries BC when the Ammonites built a large administrative center to administer rural complexes, farmsteads, farming estates to produce, we think, wine, because there were many wine presses around these rural buildings. But this was a large building. We found seals and everything to suggest the administrative feature. This seal we found on about the third day of our excavation, and it's still probably the most important single find we made. It's a seal impression, made into dirt, into clay, that talks about an administrative official of the king of the Ammonites.
Larry is also an epigrapher, and so he was very happy to miss a weekend tour to spend time with this seal impression. I also should tuck in here that if you have questions, use the Q&A button at the bottom, and we are allocating several minutes for questions after each presentation. So be sure to do that on your own machines. Okay, so we move then to something related. Larry, you said something about the administrative complex may have been related to some area of farmsteads. Is that what we have here?
Yes, and this is one of those, the best preserved one, actually. Well, not by the walls, but by the finds. The left-hand picture shows typical agricultural finds, but there are some atypical things as well. They included 3 seals that were almost, well, not identical to, but similar to those from Tel El-Umayri, suggesting a connection that our administrative complex was actually dealing with this. And this is one of the scores of sites discovered by our archaeological survey that surveyed the region around our site.
And so it's important not just to go to a site, not just to go to a tell and excavate and expect to find out everything there is to know about people in the region. You have to go to the region, and these farmsteads have certainly allowed us to do that. Larry, what do we have here?
Okay, this is very important because that same administrative center extended from the Ammonite kingdom, which was the 7th century, into the early 6th century. It extended on into the Persian period. And what is important about this is that these 6, well, we see one example here, but we found 6 similar seal impressions with the name of the Persian province of Ammon. In this picture, it's the bottom line of the inscription that says the name of the province, Ammon. And then at the top is maybe the treasurer of the province or even the governor of the province. In this case, it's a nickname, Shuba, the Ammonite nickname. So they used local people to be administrators in this Persian Empire.
Right.
And we also found an agricultural estate from the Hellenistic period, from which this type of pottery came. Typical of that period are the closed kind of lamps that we see in the foreground, but also very interesting is the tall, thin little bottle in the left-hand side called an unguentarium. They would, when somebody died, they would collect the tears in these sorts of things. Also to oil.
There's another thing, Larry, about this picture. There are 3 modes of pottery production.
Yeah.
You have handmade, you have wheel thrown, and you have mold made. So in one farmstead, in one estate, are all these 3 types of pottery manufacture. Now, let me say something about ensuring a future for the past. In the last several years, I have been working with landowners and with the government and with other stakeholders in an archaeological site and trying to preserve this site from being developed. 2 major landowners, unfortunately, one has passed away actually in the last several months, but that has now fallen into the hands of his sons. In any case, this is now at risk of being developed. Legally, nobody is supposed to develop on archaeological land, but that doesn't prevent some people from doing it occasionally. We even had in January of of 2014 a conference at the Jordan Museum. And you can see at the table, there's a person sitting kind of in the middle who is part of the royal family, Her Royal Highness Princess Sumaya. There are government officials there. There are archaeologists. There's a landowner. And so we're trying to sort out a way to make a transfer of this land to the government, but it failed. And we will have to see. I hope I don't have to write the obituary of Tel el-Umayri. That's one thing I do not want to do, but may have to. One of the ways archaeologists end slide presentations is with a picture of the sun. But kind of like graduation ceremonies, it's really commencement because this is a sunrise. So we actually have lots more work to do, and we are only beginning, even though we spent, 30 plus years excavating here. Larry is continuing to work on publication, as are some of the rest of us. So this is commencement. This is the beginning of a new day.
Thank you so much, Professor Clark and Dr. Herr. So we have a few questions here in our Q&A section. The first one asks if you could elaborate a little bit on the gender and age range.
Thank you. The skeletal remains have been examined by anthropologists from the University of California, Riverside, but also by our own Christina Reed, who's currently in Israel studying for a PhD. And this team has done a number of different kinds of analyses. One is age, and it looks like the youngest is either natal or prenatal, so very young. And then we get up into, I think we've got something, one of them, this is, don't take this to the bank, but something in the neighborhood of the 40s. Lifespan was not long in antiquity. But we do have a fairly wide range. And then the gender count, I don't recall the split. But I do know that there are more young people than older people in these burials. This is typical of burials in antiquity. If half of your children survived until they were 10 years of age, that was a good thing. So we're talking about a lot of children who died way too young to die. But that's true here too. Another thing that they're doing is studying them for different kinds of bone anomalies. A lot of anemia, evidently, in the bones of these people. Another thing we're doing is ancient DNA analysis. We're trying to see what links we might have among the people buried here. This is a secondary burial. They died elsewhere. Their bones were then collected and brought here. So we don't know about family connections or anything else.
And one more question for us in the time that we have. This one is actually also about the dolmens. We are wondering if there is a relationship between the early Bronze Age dolmens and the people that were utilizing the early Bronze Age buildings.
Not that we know of at this point. And one of the reasons is that the dolmen dates to about 3000 BC. It's what we call EB1B. The settlement, the earliest settlement, I think, Larry, we're talking EB3 or 2. I'm not sure if Larry's still on there, but okay. So I think it's about 400 to 500 years later. So we have a time span between the use of the tombs and the settlement that at least is on this site. People are arguing about whether or not these were simply for rural purposes and only showed up in rural areas, or if they might have been closer to urban ones. But in any case, ours is indicated by a separation.